There are still a few notable players available in free agency, but for the most part, NBA rosters are starting to be finalized for the new season, and with that being the case, we can now look at how each team is spending their money. The truth of the matter is that some teams are just flat out better than others at budgeting, but even with that being the case, every team has a contract or two on their payroll that they regret giving out, and that brings us to today's video. Today we'll be going through all 30 NBA teams and we'll be picking out the worst player contract value from each team. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. Going in alphabetical order, we'll start with the Atlanta Hawks, and the worst contract on their payroll right now is Kristaps Porzingis being paid $30 million for this season. Porzingis may be on an expiring contract, but to be completely honest, the Hawks don't have a terrible contract on their payroll, so his becomes the choice almost by default. Concerns about his long-term health after his disappointing finish to last season with the Celtics, which was marred by an unspecified illness, makes his situation worth monitoring, but of course if he can get back to full strength, then these worries go out the door. Next is the Boston Celtics, and the worst contract right now on their payroll is Jaylen Brown making $236 million over the next 4 years. The Celtics forked over all of the money they had to keep their core pieces around on long-term extensions, as they just gave Jason Tatum the biggest contract in NBA history, and Jaylen Brown has the second biggest contract in NBA history. Jaylen Brown is an incredible all-star talent. He's been a part of the team's success over the years in a big way. He helped the team win a championship, but there's just no world where he should be the second highest paid player in the league. He's closer to being the 25th best player in the league than he is to being a superstar, and with Tatum going down with an injury, the Celtics were forced to unload all of their other big contracts because of how much their salary cap is tied up in Brown's deal, preventing them from making any other moves. Next is the Brooklyn Nets, and the worst contract on their payroll is Michael Porter Jr. making $79 million over the next 2 seasons. MPJ's contract was the biggest blight on Denver's payroll for years, and now that they've successfully moved him to Brooklyn, he becomes their problem now. MPJ is a selfish basketball player who looks to shoot it pretty much every time he touches the ball, and doesn't really impact the game in many other ways. He is of course an outstanding shooter, but he's not much of a creator off the dribble. His defense is inconsistent, and he sure as hell is not going to pass the ball that often. Next is the Charlotte Hornets, and the worst contract on their payroll is Josh Green making $28 million over the next 2 seasons. Josh Green is a fine role player who defends well enough and hits threes at an above average clip, but his ceiling is as a mediocre 3-and-D wing at best, who will likely see his role decrease moving forward when the team is at full strength, especially after having drafted Con Knipple at his position, so the fact that he's the team's 4th highest paid player isn't the best use of resources. Next is the Chicago Bulls, and the worst contract on their payroll is Patrick Williams making $72 million over the next 4 seasons. Williams got a sizable contract extension based on assumed potential to develop further, but it's looking more and more like he's not going to come anywhere close to reaching his ceiling, and now he's being paid like a high-end starter, when the reality is he's no longer even a lock to play a big role off the bench, after having a terrible season last year, shooting below 40% from the field. Next is the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the worst contract on their payroll is Jarrett Allen making $110 million over the next 4 seasons. Jarrett Allen does a few things really well on the basketball court, but his weaknesses also just so happen to amplify the weaknesses of front court running mate Evan Mobley, and Mobley is the clear priority on this team, so the pairing has always been an awkward fit, especially in the playoffs when game plans get even tighter. Allen is a fantastic defensive center who runs a strong pick and roll as the roll man, finishes efficiently around the rim, and rebounds well, but he provides zero spacing or creation, and every year it becomes more and more difficult to stick with their Twin Towers lineup when the team falls short. Next is the Dallas Mavericks, and the worst contract on their payroll is Caleb Martin, making $30 million over the next 3 seasons. Martin got paid by the 76ers last summer in free agency, hoping he could be the versatile, high-end role player that he showed he could be in Miami during their 2023 run to the NBA Finals, but since then, Martin has been trending in the wrong direction, and after the Sixers traded him to Dallas in exchange for Quentin Grimes, he got even worse. He's struggled with injuries, his jumper has fallen off a cliff, and he's not as confident of a secondary playmaker either, which could mean his role in the rotation is up for grabs. Next is the Denver Nuggets, and the worst contract on their payroll is Zeke Naji, making $23 million over the next 3 seasons. Naji is another player who was given a contract extension under the guise of the team expecting him to develop into a useful role player, but Naji hasn't even been able to break into the team's rotation at all. Impact metrics consistently show that the team gets worse with him out on the court, and because of that, he mostly only plays garbage time minutes. Next is the Detroit Pistons, and the worst contract on their payroll is Duncan Robinson, making $48 million over the next 3 seasons. Robinson is someone the team just signed in free agency this summer, and the number they signed him for actually baffles me. Robinson signed a similarly hefty contract with the Miami Heat prior to this, and he was never able to live up to that value, being a supposed sharpshooter who hasn't been able to shoot above 40% from 3 in any of the last 4 seasons. If his 3-ball isn't falling, he's not doing much else, so even with the Pistons being in desperate need of shooting, this is a clear overpay. Next is the Golden State Warriors, and the worst contract on their payroll is Jimmy Butler, making $110 million over the next 2 seasons. The Warriors made the decision to go all in on trying to contend for the best of their abilities in the short term to maximize Steph Curry's time left, and by trading for and extending Jimmy Butler, they did so intentionally, overpaying him to make it happen. Butler, of course, has the ability to take his game to another level in the playoffs, but he's now about to turn 36 years old, coming off of a season where he only scored 17 points per game, which is hardly supermax level production. Next is the Houston Rockets, and the worst contract on their payroll is Steven Adams, making $39 million over the next 3 seasons. Adams also just signed his new contract with the team this summer, and I understand why the Rockets wanted to bring him back because his defense off the bench is so valuable, but this is a lot of money for a backup center that plays less than 15 minutes per game, and the value makes even less sense when the team also decided to bring back Clint Capella, who could end up eating into their backup center minutes even more. Next is the Indiana Pacers, and the worst contract on their payroll is Obi Toppin, making $45 million over the next 3 seasons. Obi Toppin is the 4th highest paid player on the team, and he plays the same position as Pascal Siakam, who is the highest paid player on the team. He's a fantastic high-energy backup that makes an impact with his elite athleticism and explosiveness around the rim, while also being able to heat up from 3, but he's only able to play about 20 minutes per game, which makes it hard to justify allocating that much of the cap to him. Next is the Los Angeles Clippers, and the worst contract on their payroll is Bogdan Bogdanovic, making $32 million over the next 2 seasons. Bogdanovic is surprisingly the 5th highest paid player on this stacked Clippers team right now, and he's not even a lock to be a consistent part of their rotation this year. With James Harden, Bradley Beal, Chris Paul, and Chris Dunn all in the mix in the backcourt, his services are becoming as redundant as ever as a shot creator, and I could easily see Bogdanovic being a piece moved at the trade deadline. Next is the Los Angeles Lakers, and the worst contract on their payroll is Jared Vanderbilt, making $37 million over the next 3 seasons. Ever since Vanderbilt has arrived in Los Angeles 3 seasons ago, he hasn't been able to stay healthy enough to stay on the court for even half a season. When he is healthy, they've tried to make the most of his defensive talents, but offensively, he's a bit of a black hole spacing-wise, as a complete non-factor scoring the ball inside or out, and for that to be the story story of the 5th highest paid player on the team is bad news. Next is the Memphis Grizzlies, and the worst contract on their payroll is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope making $43 million over the next 2 seasons. KCP's role on the floor is to be a 3-and-D guy that opens things up for the playmakers around him. Last season in Orlando, he failed to do that. He's coming off of a season where he shot below league average from 3 and scored his fewest amount of points per game in a season in over a decade. So while he's hoping to bounce back in Memphis now, his hefty salary is tough to swallow if he can't do that. Next is the Miami Heat, and the worst contract on their payroll is Terry Rozier making $26 million this season. Rozier may be on an expiring contract, but the Heat would love to get him off of their books as soon as possible. His play has been downright horrendous over the last year, scoring just 10 points per game, shooting a miserable 39% from the field and 29% from 3, with an uninspiring assist-to-turnover ratio and no real defensive impact whatsoever being made. Next is the Milwaukee Bucks, and the worst contract on their payroll is Kyle Kuzma making $42 million over the next 2 seasons. The Bucks don't really have any clear-cut terrible contracts on their payroll unless you're counting Damian Lillard's buyout, still on the books, so Kuzma comes in as the choice by default. He's coming off of a down year across the board, shooting pretty inefficiently and struggling on the defensive end compared to what he has shown he can do in years prior. Next is the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the worst contract on their payroll is Jaden McDaniels making $108 million over the next 4 seasons. When McDaniels signed his contract extension with the team, he was looking like the perfect glue guy to have in the middle of their lineup as a versatile defensive talent that was also hitting his threes at an impressive clip and showing promising signs of budding creation skills off the dribble, but last season he took a step backwards, struggling from 3 and struggling to make a positive impact, with the team performing better with him on the bench according to Impact Analytics. Next is the New Orleans Pelicans, and the worst contract on their payroll is DeJounte Murray making $94 million over the next 3 seasons. DeJounte Murray went from being a promising young 2-way stud on the Spurs to then being paired with Trae Young in Atlanta, hoping to get them back to contention, and when that didn't work, he was shipped to New Orleans, where his career has continued trending in the wrong direction. Murray not only struggled mightily with injuries this year, but he was one of the least efficient volume scorers in the entire league when he was healthy. His perimeter defense is no longer elite like it once was, and off the court, he's been vocal about how much he has hated his time on the Pelicans so far. So all around, this is a disaster of a deal. Next is the New York Knicks, and the worst contract on their payroll is Karl-Anthony Towns making $171 million over the next 3 seasons. The Knicks have locked up all 5 of their starters to either max deals or close to max deals, with Towns being the only guy signed to a supermax extension on the team, but it's definitely up for debate whether or not he's truly a superstar, supermax caliber player. He is without question an all-star and a lethal shooter at the center position, but defensively, he's always been a negative, and realistically, he's probably not in that top-tier elite echelon of talent in the league. Next is the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the worst contract on their payroll is Isaiah Joe making $35 million over the next 3 seasons. Joe is being paid like a role player that has a solidified spot in the rotation and provides a necessary skill set off the bench, which at one point was true as he was a sharpshooter, needed to space the floor for certain lineups, but he fell almost entirely out of the rotation after the first round of the playoffs this year, and moving forward, the Thunder have more than enough depth to survive without him, making his contract pretty expendable. Next is the Orlando Magic, and the worst contract on their payroll is Jalen Suggs making $150 million over the next 5 seasons. I'm not saying Suggs can't get better, but this massive near-contract extension definitely feels pretty premature compared to what he has actually done on a basketball court in his career. He's definitely one of the league's premier perimeter defenders, and deserves a ton of credit on that end of the floor, but on offense, the Magic as a whole have suffocatingly bad floor spacing and a lack of playmaking creativity, and Suggs contributes to both of those struggles while playing the position that's supposed to help in that regard, as an inefficient shooter of the ball and not really a high-end passing talent despite being a point guard. Next is the Philadelphia 76ers, and the worst contract on their payroll right now is Paul George, making $162 million over the next 3 seasons. The Sixers signed George in free agency last summer, hoping he could be the piece that puts them over the top, but instead, they happened to bring him in right when his body was ready to start breaking down. George missed half of the season last year due to injuries, and when he was on the court, he looked like a shell of his former self, averaging just 16 points per game on middling shooting splits and a noticeably slower first step and lack of burst compared to his former All-Star days. Next is the Phoenix Suns, and the worst contract on their payroll is Jaylen Brown, making $105 million over the next 3 seasons. Jaylen Brown came into the league with high hopes of potential stardom, but at this point, it's looking more like all he's ever going to be is an inconsistent volume scorer capable of the occasional big night, but more often than not will make you want to rip your hair out watching the frustrating decisions that he makes on and off the ball. The fact that he also plays the same position as Devin Booker on this team makes the fit even tougher in this new squad. Next is the Portland Trail Blazers, and the worst contract on their payroll is Jeremy Grant, making $102 million over the next 3 seasons. Jeremy Grant signed his extension the same offseason that the Blazers traded Damian Lillard away, and ever since then, Grant has been coasting, collecting his paychecks, as his production has gradually decayed further and further. He was once an outstanding two-way wing that scored efficiently and defended multiple positions at a high level, but now his effort is frustrating. He's one of the least efficient scorers in the game, and he's being paid like a borderline all-star. Next is the Sacramento Kings, and the worst contract on their payroll is DeMar DeRozan, making $50 million over the next 2 seasons. The Kings are another group without a contract that necessarily counts as terrible, but based on their ceiling being as low as it is right now, they'd probably like to shed this salary off of their books, since adding him didn't really change anything about their success on the floor. Next is the San Antonio Spurs, and the worst contract on their payroll is Keldon Johnson, making $35 million over the next 2 seasons. Johnson put up some big numbers a few years ago when the Spurs were still tanking, and he had the green light to shoot as much as he wanted, and that earned him this nice pay raise. But now that the team is shifting towards actually trying to compete for the playoffs, his role has seen a sharp reduction, his production has taken a sizable hit, he's still not good enough as a shooter to justify giving more touches to, and defensively, he can be a bit of a mess at times. Next is the Toronto Raptors, and the worst contract on their payroll is Immanuel Quickley, making $130 million over the next 4 seasons. Quickley has obvious talent at the point guard position to be excited about as a young, speedy guard that can electrify in transition, but this contract was given just feels pretty premature compared to what he has actually done in the league. This is a contract for someone who produces like a borderline all-star, which Quickley still has not been at any point in his career yet. Next is the Utah Jazz, and the worst contract on their payroll is Lauri Markkanen, making $196 million over the next 4 seasons. Is Lauri Markkanen fool's gold, or was last season a fluke down year? For the Jazz's sake, they're hoping it's the latter, because they are now paying him a salary matching the best players in the game, despite having just 1 All-Star Game appearance 3 years ago. And finally, last up is the Washington Wizards, and the worst contract on their payroll is Chris Middleton, making $33 million for this season. Middleton's on the last year of his contract that he signed when he was still an all-star caliber player, helping Milwaukee compete for championships, and now that he's in Washington, he's more so just a veteran leader than anything else, with his play on the court nowhere close to what it used to be after all the injuries he's racked up and at his age. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these contracts and how they're holding their teams back. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.